Hello, welcome to another episode of Set Musings. We're on to Fifth Dawn, which is the third set from the original Mirrodin block. Hopefully there's not too much background noise today. It's a rather rainy day in Nova Scotia and I can hear the rain tappity on the window, so I don't know if that's coming through. Anyway, let's get on and take a look through this set and by means of the usual slicing and dicing. So 165 cards in the set, 55 commons, 55 uncommons, 55 rares. So we're still in that symmetry in the rares period, or symmetry in the rarities period in Magic. This came out June the 4th, 2004. We're looking out for themes such as beacons, what are called cogs, prismatics. We've got scry and sunburst in the set, in addition to some of the keywords and ability words that we've seen in previous sets in the block. But I'm going to obviously focus specifically on things that were introduced in this set. But of course I will mention anything that comes up which is comes from the block as a whole. So here's our 165 cards. Again, we'll go for the customary just quick scroll through so we can get a rough feel for the artwork in the set and how consistent or inconsistent it is. And obviously the sort of, the general theme of the set that artwork is imparting. Again, as we saw with the land as well, and for this, of course, the basic land. In these blocks, the basic land always comes from the first set. For instance, if you're buying theme decks around this time, the artwork for the basic land cards would have come from the first set of the block Mirrodin. If you'd bought, say, a Fifth Dawn theme deck, sort of spiky look to everything. You'll see. Also here, they've still got this washed out mana colours, and I don't think this was really resolved or fixed or whatever you want to call it until the following block. And no doubt you'll notice is obviously being part of the Mirrodin block, artifacts are a thing, and I've broken down, because of this, certain slices through the artifacts. Wayfarer's bauble here, and obviously because of the prevalence of artifacts, we're going to see a lot more artifacts at common in this set, as we've seen with sets in the block as a whole. So let's start off with artifacts. So actually 65 cards in the set are artifacts. And you can see, because equipment was introduced in the block, as I mentioned previously, quite a lot, bit of this, a substantial portion is equipment. There's also a number of artifact creatures, but there's a number of just straight artifacts. Crucible of Worlds, which allows us to play lands from our graveyard as though they were in your hand, and of course Doubling Cube. This is interesting. So we've got a piece of equipment here that actually becomes an artifact creature without it being necessarily attached to anything, but you can attach it to something, to a creature, and get +1/+5, which obviously reflects what it becomes if you just pay this activation cost. There's Sunburst, so this comes into play with a +1/+1 counter on it for each colour of mana used to pay its cost. So obviously that will encourage you to go down a potentially 5 colour route. Helm of Cauldra, we've mentioned the Mega Cycle inside of the block of these Cauldra equipment. And you've seen previously and here, as we're going, they've gone down the sort of multiple colour type mechanic, or a mechanic that encourages playing multiple colours of mana. No doubt we'll see quite a few things that enable that to happen. So just so you know what I've done here, so out of this overall group of 65 cards, there's a subset within that of 42 which aren't creature artifacts. So these would be regular artifacts and equipment. And there are 10 artifacts that are just equipment. And the other thing as well you'll notice here is there is a number of cards. I think I'll come back to this cycle, so I imagine I'll be back with this. You'll notice there's a number of pieces of equipment which have sort of alternate ways of equipping them. So we've got equip, all of these like equip for single mana of any colour, attached to target creature you control, equip only as a sorcery. But additionally, you can do this, so the 2 white, attach Healer's Headdress to target creature you control. And they're all like that here. There's 5 of them. 5 of them. I think that's it within the cycle. But we'll come back to that. Okay, so Scry was in the set. There's, 9 Scry cards, and you can see slightly more in blue than any other colour. So with Scry, it looks like everything here is all Scry too. So, but what you'll notice here. So we'll use this as an example, and we'll come on to, are there any, I think that's the only permanent here, and the only one which is slightly different. Yeah, so for all the others, you can see Scry 2, look at the top cards of your library, put any number of them on the bottom of your library, and the rest on top in any order. So all of these have Scry 2 stapled to them, all these spells. This one's interesting in that it's an enchantment, so whenever you play an instant or sorcery spell, you may pay 1 if you do Scry 2. So this one gets activated if you pay an activation cost. These ones just trigger when the spell is cast. And we've got Sunburst here, so they come into play with a charge counter on it for each colour of mana used to pay its cost. So you can see here, this one here, we've got 5 and 6. So a lot of these are obviously going to be generally high casting costs to facilitate, playing 5 colours of mana. But there are ones with less than 5 casting cost. So for instance, this one's 3. So if you pay 3, you're only going to get a maximum of 3 +1/+1 counters on here. But you'll see where this can be altered. So there's some cards which facilitate the use of 5 colours to cast spells. Now also, you can see here we've got a number of different counters as well that it puts on. So it doesn't just put on +1/+1 counters on. In the case of creatures, it also puts on other charge counters on regular artifacts as well. So it's interesting, the abilities on both creatures and artifacts. And you'll also notice all of these, if they are creatures, they're all artifact creatures. This one also combines with modular, which we saw in the previous set. So with modular, when it's put into a graveyard, you may put its +1/+1 counters on target artifact creature. So that's an interesting combination there. You're obviously going to want to maximise those counters through making sure you're playing as many colours as possible. And then when it does die, the modular triggers. So that's interesting there. I think that's the only one that combines both Sunburst and modular. And obviously with a lot of these, in addition to the Sunburst on here, there are other abilities. So here you're actually able to play around with those charge counters. And you've got a way of doubling up +1/+1 counters on this one, and ways of manipulating counters with this one and this one, and here. So a number of these have ways of playing around with these counters. So it's an interesting thing. I mentioned there were beacons in the set. So we've got Beacon of Immortality, Beacon of Tomorrow, Beacon of Unrest, Beacon of Destruction, and Beacon of Creation. Instants and sorceries, Beacon of Immortality, double target player's life total, shuffle Beacon of Immortality into its owner's library. So all of these get shuffled back into your library after being played. So that obviously gives some explanation as to why these are a high casting cost. But they do appear to have a fairly marked impact on the board. You can see this one here. Although again, we've noticed this before, there seems to be an encouragement within a set where they're trying to encourage you to either play artifacts or, in this case, in this set, in the block, multiple colours. There are cards that almost want to pull you towards green. Where in this block, green seem to be antagonistic towards the overall artifact theme, which is no surprise, being green, it being anti-artifacts. There was a cycle of bringers. So this is what I was talking about here. You can see we've got high casting cost creatures, where it would be possible here if you were playing so what I suppose I'm trying to say is, you'll see there's other cards that encourage you to play 5 colour. This is one. These are one set of cards that do that. Now in this case, if you're playing 5 colour, they all cost less to cast. As you can see, these are like 9 mana all to cast. But if you happen to be playing 5 colour, you can get them out for 5 mana. Also, if you happen to be also playing Sunburst, then another reason to play 5 colour. So you may play Wooburg rather than you pay Bringer of the White Dawn's mana cost, and that's the same on all of these for each card. We've got Trample on all of them as well. They are all 5/5s, but they have each a different additional ability. So the white one, you can return target artifact card from the graveyard to your turn at the beginning of your upkeep. The blue one, at the beginning of your upkeep, you may draw 2 cards. You can see they're all upkeep triggers here. So this one, the upkeep trigger, you may pay 2 life. If you do, search your library for a card, then shuffle your library and put that card on top of it. And then the red one triggers on upkeep. You may untap target creature and gain control of it until end of turn. That creature gains haste until end of turn. And the green one, at the beginning of your upkeep, you may put a 2/2 green beast creature token into play. So here's the cycle that I was talking about. I think this is often referred to as color aligned equipment. So they all have mana in the appropriate color. Attach the card to a target creature you control. And of course these are color specific, one for each color. Now, what's the difference between this and this? Well, the difference is this here can occur at instant speed. So this is an instant speed attachment. This is a sorcery speed attachment. So the equipability can be played, if you like, anytime you could play an instant. So that's the difference, and that's why there's a difference in the casting cost. And so you can see how this is interesting, because these can get bounced around during combat, whereas using the regular equip, which you'd have to do if you didn't have these particular colours, you can only do it when you can play a sorcery. And of course they all do slightly different things. +0, +2, and has tap. Prevent the next one damage that will be dealt to target creature player's turn. Equipped creature can't be the target spells or abilities for blue. The black one gets +1, +0 for each artifact you control. First strike for the red one, and the green one gets +1, +1 and has trample. Again, I know I've shown this in the other 3 sets, but each one has a card from each of the sets. So this is the 5th Dawn one, the Caldra Mega Cycle, and I also include this one so you can just see where they ultimately went with this a lot later in Magic's history. And it sort of aggregates these abilities, and it's a living weapon. We've got Stand Firm and Lose Hope, which are our pairs. Or what should I say? There is one pair, I believe, in the set, and this is it. So the white one, single white, target creature gets +1, +0 until end of turn, scry 2. Lose Hope, -1, -1 until end of turn, scry 2. There was also a cycle of protection artifacts in here. We'll have a look in a moment when we start to go through some of this. So I've mentioned scrying and Sunburst. Let's just scroll down the creatures. So there's 74 creatures. You can see here we've got this 5 colour business going on. You can The Joiner Adept, lands you control have tap, add 1 mana of any colour to your mana pool. That is a rare though. Got Eternal Witness in the set. Silvok Explorer. Sacrifice a Forest. So it is interesting, again, you've got this paradox, because obviously green cards are a good way of generating different colours of mana, particularly in this set, to help with Sunburst, which seems to be on obviously artifacts, but at the same moment green, you know, thematically hates on artifacts. So yeah, interesting. Oh, that's a way of generating Wooburg there. Oh, Affinity as well, of course, is still kicking around in this set 'cause it's part of the block. And Imprint as well, we've seen that earlier in the block. But of course dialed back a little bit in this set because the focus was on newer keywords and abilities, particularly for the set. Got a few sack effects going on as well, by the look of things. It's also interesting to see certain abilities stapled to artifacts, which you'd normally see maybe in other colours. And now they're on artifacts which make, you know, absolutely no mention of those colours. Got a bit of protection from different colours as well. Some stuff that obviously cares about equipment. Some interesting flyers as well in the set. There's an Affinity card in blue. Oh, and Relentless Rats, of course. Deck can have any number of cards named Relentless Rats. So what I've done there is that's all the creatures in the set, including creature artifacts. There's 74 of those. Within that, 51 of the cards are creature cards, sorry, are not artifacts. So that gives you just some idea of how many artifact creatures there were versus straight creatures. Instance, 22 instance. So we've got instant speed, creature destruction, where those creatures dealt damage to you this turn. Again, this is, you know, classic white, destroying target blocking creatures. Life gain. Interesting twist in white here, based around equipment. So damage based on the number of equipment that you control, which is interesting as well with Raska being in the set. It's Condescends in here, so we've got counter target spell unless its controller plays X. Tap down on lands. There's a couple of Affinity cards in blue here, so clearly drawing you to playing maybe a blue artifact deck. This is interesting. So where they replace words, so choose one. Change the text of target spell or permanent by replacing all instances of one basic land type with another, or change the text of target spell or permanent by replacing all instances of one colour word with another. Devouring Shadow, so 2 black, destroy target creature. It can't be regenerated. However, you lose life equal to that creature's toughness. That's hence the low casting cost. It's got a sack effect here. Instant speed sacrifice. Lose hope. -1, -1. So here's our direct damage red spells. So we've got Magma Jet, 1 and a red, 2 damage. Target creature or player has got Scry stapled to it. And then this one, Feedback Bolt, 4 and a black. So you normally, 4 and black, 4 and a red. You also have these sort of slightly higher casting cost red spells as well. Damage spells. So with this one, it deals damage to target player equal to the number of artifacts you control. Obviously red, we've got a way of destroying artifacts. Pump in green, and a way of destroying artifacts at instant speed in green as well. Let's have a look at sorceries. 18 sorceries. So this will bounce back all artifact cards from your graveyard to play. Okay. So we got what? Equipment tutoring. Artifact tutoring. Some of those beacons are obviously at sorcery speed. Serum Visions. Interesting black card draw where you get to draw 2 cards and lose 2 life. What sort of red sorcery speed stuff we got? Artifact Destruction. Or Mana Geyser. Add red to your mana pool for each tap land your opponents control. Fortune. Oh, there's All Sun's Dawn. 4 and a green. For each colour, return up to 1 target card of that colour from your graveyard to your hand. Then remove All Sun's Dawn from the game. Beacon of Creation we've already seen. Channel of the Suns. We can get to add Wooburg to our mana pool. 3 and a green. Oh, and of course Entwine as well. That was in the block, so we're seeing it in the set here. Again, dialed back a little bit. Number of enchantments. Nine of them. Here's a Stasis Cocoon, again, something we often see in white and blue as well, as an enchantment, although this only enchants artifacts. Enchanted artifact ability, this can't be played. If enchanted artifact is a creature, it cannot attack or block. So of course, because there's a number of artifact creatures, this is also effective against a certain amount of creatures in the set. Again, another sort of thing you see in green, its ability to enchant lands and then start messing with the mana in various ways. And that's interesting. It's a way of increasing your counters. Because counters are a thing because of the Sunburst mechanic. 2 legendaries. Raksha, Golden Cub, 5 and 2 white for a 3/4 creature, cat, soldier, legend. Attacking doesn't cause risk a Golden Cub to attack, so it has vigilance. As long as Raksha is equipped, cats you control get +2/+2 and have double strike. So yes, cat tribal. I'm not sure how many cats there were in the block as a whole. I suspect there probably weren't that many in this particular set. And then back to this. So let's try this. for the kitties. Oh. Well, I suppose. Well, that's interesting because we've got two at common. So, if you were doing, a sealed pool with 6 packs, not really something you could definitely pull off. If you got lucky and had this and had a few copies. I mean, if you were doing the way, some of the Deck Turtle episodes I've been doing recently, where obviously we're opening 6 packs of a small set, and we got lucky, and these cards had quite a high, count because they're at common in a particular pool. That will be one thing. Easier way is obviously if you're drafting this and a Raksha happens to come around early and you draft that, obviously you can sculpt your deck around these, because you're going to see a lot of these in a draft pool. So yeah, I won't do it. I could check the block as a whole, but that's I'll leave it. I'm sure everybody can check that themselves. I always include links. You can do extra. That's the idea. If you want, you can go to the description, click on the links, and start playing around with this, and slice and dice your own way. That's part of what I'm hoping people will do. Wondering what we're doing here, right? So we're now at the point where we're looking at prices. So let's do that. So yeah, I had a feeling this was in 10th edition as well. It's been reprinted a few times. You can see also as like special versions. So 5th Dawn, 10th edition, and then in the 2019 core set, was in the World Champ promos as well. Hence the these are black bordered actually. Okay. What did they look like for the Magic Online one? Oh, same artwork. So Crucible of Worlds. You may play land cards from your graveyard as though they were in your hand. So $43 in the 5th edition. It's actually cheaper than the 10th edition version. Or the 5th Dawn, should I say. Engineered Explosive, of course. That was in the set. Extra cast. It's got Sunburst. 2 sacrifice Engineered Explosive. Destroy each non-land permanent with converted mana cost equal to the number of charge counters on Engineered Explosives. It's in Modern Masters, Double Masters, Ultimate Masters. You can probably guess what format this card is played in. So $40 for that. Vidalcan Orrery. You may play non-land cards anytime you could play an instant. I suspect we're going to see quite a few of these when we look at the prevalence in the EDH rec stats as well. 5th Dawn, Conspiracy, and the list. That means it's sort of on that special list where cards get randomly put in the more recent sets. Auroch Champion, protection from red and black. Whenever another creature comes into play, you gain 1 life. 5th Dawn and Iconic Masters. It's quite a bit cheaper in the Iconic Masters version. Oh, Doubling Cube. $27. Also been reprinted in 10th edition. And we saw this earlier. Beacon of Creation only ever printed in 5th Dawns, $25. Steel Shaper's Gift, down to 21. It was printed in Mirrodin Pure versus New Phyrexia, which must have been a Magic the Gathering Online deck of some description. Like a dual deck. Search your library for equipment card, reveal that card, then put it into your hand and shuffle your library. Croc Clan Ironworks, $20. Was in a World Champ deck. Sacrifice an artifact, you gain 2. Add 2 to your mana pool. Mycosynth Golem has affinity for artifacts, so no surprises, it's fairly high up the list. Price wise, 1970. Fist of Suns, you may pay white rather than pay the mana cost of spells you pay. So yeah, there's a few of these cards that crop up in Magic, and I was mentioning that about some of the sort of 3-4 mana artifacts. If you have this in play, you end up paying more for those cards, but you get more counters on them because it allows you to pay Walberg instead of, say, 3 mana, and you've only got 3 mana of any colour then, maximum. So yeah, and there's a few other cards. This has cropped up outside of the set. It's 1374, and of course, no surprise, that's been printed in Commander 2017. Grinding Station. Second artifact, target player puts top 3 cards of his or her library into his or her graveyard. Whenever an artifact comes into play, you may untap Grinding Station, and we're at the 10 mark. So now it's all below Paradise Mantle and so on. Or Staff of Domination, of course. It's actually banned in Modern. Surprise, surprise. Okay. I don't think there's any surprise here in terms of popularity, according to EDH Rec. So Eternal Witness, Wayfarer's Bauble, Crystal Words, Night Whisper. Yeah, good way of doing card draw if you're playing mono black. Mana Geyser, Serum Visions, Trinket Mage, Verdulcan Orrery, Staff of Domination. You can see here. So, and particularly heavy presence of artifacts. Eternal Witness. Let's have a quick look. %29% of all decks. That's going to go in a number of decks that obviously play green. And also have graveyard shenanigans. So like Reanimator type stuff. And of course, commanders also that revolve around, doing something as a result of sack effects, and then you just want to get certain cards back. Imagine White Wayfarer's Bauble is all over the map. But again, there's a lot of cards that do similar things. Oh, Black and Black Blade. Yep. So that's the set musings part over with. So again, super interesting. I love doing, if you were to ask me what's the favourite episodes that I do outside of, opening stuff, because that's always fun, it's the set musings, definitely, because it's just great to look at these. Okay, look at all the times that's been reprinted. It's funny, isn't it, that the World Championship deck version is more expensive than anything else, and you find something fine is the original is cheaper than some of the reprints. Although I suppose because most of the time they've been reprinted in Commander, they never really changed the artwork, did they? No. I wonder why they've never been tempted to mess with that artwork, considering the amount of times they've reprinted that. Anyway, yep. So another wonderful set musings. So what's on the horizon? So after this, next video after this, we have a Deck Durdle, Fifth Dawn. That's the card pool that we've got. Interesting to see where I go. As you've seen in previous episodes, I'm finding it quite hard to build decks in this particular block. It's just, you got to get you have to sort of get your head around like Artifact Matters sets, and I'm not particularly used to that. Then we've got Commander Fodder, so we're going on with theme decks. At some point in the future, I might, once we move away from what I call the old school theme decks into more the intro decks, I may mix up or do something different with Commander Fodder in terms of what I use to seed it, because currently what I'm doing is I'm using the theme decks to seed the card pool. I'm looking possibly at a way of aggregating maybe these. I'm not sure yet. I'm loath to stop doing the deck Durdle. I think people find it interesting and useful to carry on. But I think as I move more into intro packs, I do need to slightly tweak this a bit. And so what I'll probably end up doing is do Commander Fodder episodes that are in some way related to a card pool from the set that I'm talking about that particular week in some way. So, like the rares or common rares, popular rares from the set, or a popular mechanic from the set that also appears as a rare that would make an interesting seed to use for a Commander Fodder episode. So rather than using a deck as a seed, I'm using a number of cards, like a certain card pool from the set, exclusively from the set, and then using that from there. So for this one, for this week's one, obviously we're sticking with a theme deck, so it's going to be one of these, either Nuts and Bolts, Special Forces, Stampede, or Sunburst. And you can probably guess where I'm tending to go now with these is I try, if I can, to choose a seed which will promote a certain keyword or ability that's prevalent in the set. And so I really fancy building a Sunburst commander deck using, again, of course, I'm using the tools in Architect to make suggestions to sort of guide me in my journey. And so here's the original deck, an original Sunburst deck, and this is it effectively, just with all the multiple copies removed, appropriate number of lands, and then a commander in this case, because there's no legendary in this set. So I thought this would be a great commander to use for this. So we can play 5 colours, and it's encouraging us to play the Wooburg colours. So any cards which have Sunburst on them, we have a choice. We can either play the mana cost, or we can go for full Wooburg, and that's particularly helpful with ones that don't cost 5 mana to cast. But the nice thing is we have an option. Also, because it's counters, I really wanted to play Atraxa in my main deck. I was tempted to maybe play Atraxa as my commander and only go with the 4 colours, but I thought it was better to play Joda and then have this as a support card. And obviously what I'm hoping will happen is, as I use the algorithm in here, their suggestion algorithm, it's going to suggest certain proliferate cards, which are going to really help with cards that are coming to play with counters on them. So that's something to look forward to. So once again, thanks for watching this latest episode of Set Musings, and bye for now.